My name is Sadie Brennan. I'm 27 years old. My grandfather, Emmett Brennan, was a clockmaker for 52 years. Not the kind who replaces watch batteries at the mall. A real clockmaker. The kind who carves gears from raw brass with hands so steady a surgeon would be jealous. The kind who can listen to a broken mechanism and tell you which tooth on which wheel is 1/10 of a millimeter off. His shop, Brennan and Time, sat on the corner of Main and Cathedral in Whitmore, Pennsylvania. A small brick building with a green door and a window full of clocks, all ticking in perfect unison. If you pressed your ear against the glass, the whole building hummed, like it had a heartbeat. 2 years ago, my uncle Raymond and my aunt Colleen, my grandfather's eldest children, had my grandfather committed to a psychiatric facility against his will. They claimed he was delusional, paranoid, dangerous. Their evidence? He had been talking to clocks. What they didn't understand, what they never bothered to understand, was that Emmett Brennan wasn't talking to clocks. He was talking to the things he had hidden inside them. Because over the course of 40 years, my grandfather had been concealing documents, recordings, photographs, and one final devastating will inside the mechanisms of 216 handmade clocks, scattered across Whitmore, in the homes of clients, on the walls of churches and courthouses and restaurants, an entire legal case, ticking quietly inside the walls of a town. And the day his children demolished his shop to sell the land beneath it, they destroy every clock on the premises, every single one, except one. The one bolted to the wall behind the counter that no one could remove, because my grandfather had built it into the foundation itself. That clock contained everything, and I was the only person alive who knew how to open it. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe right now, but only if this story genuinely gives you chills. And drop a comment. Have you ever known someone so underestimated that the world didn't realize what they'd built until it was almost too late? Tell me about them. Because this story is for every quiet genius the world almost forgot. Let's go back. Emmett Brennan was born in Whitmore, Pennsylvania in 1948. His father, Oscar, was a watchmaker who'd emigrated from Switzerland in 1939. Oscar opened a small repair shop on Main Street with nothing but a workbench, a set of loops, and the kind of patience that most people mistake for slowness. Oscar taught Emmett everything. Not just horology, the science of measuring time, but a philosophy that went with it. Time is the only honest thing in this world, Emmett. People lie, money lies, power lies, but a clock. A clock tells you exactly where you stand, every second, without judgment. Emmett took over the shop at 23 when Oscar's eyesight failed. He renamed it Brennan and Time. Over the next 5 decades, he became more than a clockmaker. He became the timekeeper of an entire town. He built the clock in the Whitmore courthouse lobby. He built the clock tower for St. Augustine's Church. He maintained the antique grandfather clock in the mayor's office that had been there since 1901. He made wedding clocks for newlyweds, custom pieces with the couple's initials carved into the face. He made memorial clocks for funerals, pieces that stopped at the exact moment the person passed. Every clock was a story, every gear was a sentence, and Emmett Brennan spoke the language fluently. He married my grandmother, Rose, in 1972. They had 3 children, Raymond, the eldest, Colleen, the middle, and my mother, Vivian, the youngest. Raymond went into commercial real estate. Loud voice, firm handshake, the kind of man who measured everything in square footage and dollar signs. He looked at his father's shop and saw a waste of prime corner real estate, a single-story brick building on the most valuable lot in downtown Whitmore. To Raymond, every tick of every clock in that shop was money bleeding out. Colleen married a financial advisor named Glenn Pryor. Colleen had inherited Rose's beauty, but none of her warmth. She visited the shop once a year at Christmas and spent the entire visit looking at her phone. She once told Emmett his work was a cute hobby. He never forgot that word, cute. My mother, Vivian, was different. She was quiet like Emmett. She understood the shop. She understood the silence between ticks. She married a music teacher named David, had me, and then died in a car accident when I was 6 years old. My father couldn't handle the grief. He moved to Oregon and sent birthday cards that arrived late and eventually stopped arriving at all. Emmett took me in, raised me above the shop. I fell asleep every night to the sound of 200 clocks breathing in rhythm beneath my bedroom floor. He taught me everything: how to clean a mainspring without scratching the barrel, how to listen for a misaligned escapement, how to carve a gear tooth with a file so fine it felt like painting. But the most important thing he taught me wasn't clockmaking, it was patience. Sadie, he'd say, holding a movement under his loop, tweezers steady between his fingers. People rush because they're afraid of being forgotten. A clockmaker is never afraid of being forgotten because everything he builds keeps counting after he's gone. I didn't know he was also talking about something else entirely, something hidden, something ticking. Rose died in 2015. Heart failure. Emmett sat beside her hospital bed for 3 days, holding her hand, his other hand resting on a pocket watch he'd made for their wedding day. When she passed, he stopped the watch. 3:42 a.m. He never wound it again. After Rose's death, the visits from Raymond and Colleen increased, not in warmth, but in frequency. And every visit had the same undercurrent. The shop, the property, the land. Raymond came first. He stood in the doorway of Brennan and Time, looking around at the walls of clocks like a man surveying a demolition site. Dad, this building is worth $600,000. The land alone is worth more than everything inside it. You're 70 years old. How long are you going to keep doing this? Emmett didn't look up from the movement he was assembling. Until I stop. That's not a plan, Dad. It's the only plan that matters, Raymond. Colleen came next, softer approach, worse intentions. Dad, we're worried about you. Living alone above the shop. No help. What if something happens? What if you fall? We think you should consider moving somewhere safer. We could sell the building, use the money to set you up in a lovely retirement community. Emmett looked at her over his glasses. Your mother and I built this shop together, Colleen. She picked the color of that door. She planted the window box. This building isn't real estate. It's a reliquary. Colleen didn't know what reliquary meant. She smiled anyway. Over the next year, I watched them tighten the circle. Raymond brought a real estate appraiser to the shop, just to get a sense of things. Colleen started calling Emmett's doctor, Dr. Franklin Nash, asking about cognitive decline, about signs of dementia, about the legal process for determining mental fitness. I know this because Dr. Nash told me. He was also a client. Emmett had made a clock for his office 15 years ago, a beautiful walnut case with a brass pendulum engraved with the Hippocratic Oath. Dr. Nash called me one evening, his voice careful. Sadie, your aunt has been asking me questions about your grandfather's mental state. Leading questions. I want you to know there is nothing wrong with Emmett's mind. I examined him 3 months ago. Sharp as a tack. But someone is building a case and you need to be aware. I thanked him. Then I drove to the shop and told Emmett everything. He was sitting at his bench, a loop strapped to his head, adjusting a hairspring thinner than a human hair. He didn't look up. I know, he said. You know? I've known for 2 years, Sadie. He set down his tweezers, removed the loop, looked at me with eyes that held 52 years of precision. Why do you think I've been building so many clocks? Now I need to pause here, because what my grandfather revealed to me that night changed everything I thought I knew about him, about his work, and about every clock I'd ever seen him make. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like someone you love was being slowly cornered, slowly erased by people who should have protected them, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because the next 3 minutes of this story are going to change the way you see patients forever. I promise you that. Let's continue. Emmett stood up from his bench that night. He walked to the back wall of the shop, the wall covered in tools, jigs, templates, and pressed a small brass catch I'd walked past 10,000 times without noticing. A panel swung open. Behind it was a second workspace, smaller, hidden, lit by a single lamp. On the workbench was a ledger, handwritten, 216 entries. Each entry was a clock. The client's name, the date it was delivered, the location where it hung. and in a column marked contents, a description of what was hidden inside the mechanism. Clock number 12, Henderson Residence, copy of original property deed. Clock number 47, St. Augustine's Sacristy, audio recording, Raymond discussing sale of shop with developer, June 2019. Clock number 88, Dr. Nash's office, copy of Rose's medical records showing no family history of dementia. Clock number 119, Whitmore Public Library reference room, notarized letter from Emmett's attorney confirming mental competency, updated annually. Clock number 203, Mayor's office, seal envelope containing Emmett's revised will and trust. 216 clocks, 40 years of placement, an entire legal case distributed across a town like a nervous system. Each clock a node, each mechanism a vault. Raymond and Colleen think this shop is just a building, Emmett said quietly. They think my clocks are just decoration. They've never understood what I actually do. He turned to me. I don't just build clocks, Sadie. I build time capsules. And I've been preparing for this moment since the day Raymond first looked at this building and saw a price tag instead of a home. I stared at the ledger. 40 years. He'd been hiding evidence inside clocks for 40 years. Not because he was paranoid, because he understood his children. He understood their patience would eventually run out. And when it did, he wanted the town itself to hold the truth. But there's one clock that matters more than all the rest, he said. He pointed to the wall behind the counter. A large clock. Dark mahogany case, Roman numerals, brass hands. It had been there since before I was born. It was bolted into the wall, not hung, bolted, with brackets that went through the brick and into the foundation itself. That clock contains everything. The original deed to this property, my complete will, a full accounting of every asset, and a recording I made last year. A recording of Raymond and Colleen discussing how to have me committed so they could sell the building. He looked at me. Only one person knows how to open it. The mechanism requires a specific key, turned in a specific sequence, at a specific time. I designed it myself. It cannot be forced. It cannot be drilled. If anyone tries to remove it from the wall, a fail-safe triggers and the contents are destroyed. Who has the key? I asked. He reached into his vest pocket and placed a small brass key on the workbench, hand-carved. Unlike any key I'd ever seen, it had teeth on both sides and a hollow shaft. You do, little bird. 4 months later, they made their move. Raymond and Colleen filed an emergency petition with the county court. They presented a psychiatric evaluation, signed by a doctor named Paul Weston, a man I'd never heard of, who claimed to have examined Emmett twice. The evaluation stated that Emmett displayed delusional behavior, including speaking to inanimate objects, obsessive repetitive manual activity, and paranoid ideation regarding family members. Speaking to inanimate objects. He talked to clocks while working. Every craftsman talks to their work. Every painter talks to a canvas. Every mechanic talks to an engine. This is not delusion. This is devotion. Obsessive, repetitive manual activity. He was a clockmaker. His entire life was precise, repetitive motion. That's not a symptom. That's a skill set. Paranoid ideation regarding family members. He told Dr. Nash his children were trying to take his shop, which they literally were. They weaponized his craft against him. They turned his expertise into evidence of insanity. And a judge who didn't know Emmett, who'd never stepped inside Brennan in time, who'd never heard 200 clocks breathing in unison, signed the commitment order on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 sheriff's deputies came to the shop at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday. Emmett was at his bench, working steady, the way he'd been every morning for 52 years. They told him he needed to come with them. He stood, set down his tweezers, took off his loop, looked at the clock on the wall, the one bolted to the foundation, and checked the time. 8:17 a.m. Then he looked at me. I was standing in the doorway, tears running down my face, fist clenched, ready to fight someone, anyone. Don't, Sadie. His voice was calm, steady like a pendulum. Not yet. We follow the sequence. Remember what I taught you. Patience isn't weakness. Patience is the mainspring. Everything else moves because of it. He walked out with the deputies, dignified, unhurried. The way he did everything. I stood in the empty shop. The clocks ticked, all 216 of them scattered across town, still counting, still holding their secrets. I pressed my hand against the mahogany clock on the wall. I could feel it vibrating, alive, waiting. Then I called Frank Moretti's daughter, Nina Moretti, an attorney in Philadelphia who specialized in elder rights litigation. I told her everything: the hidden clocks, the ledger, the commitment, the key in my pocket. "How fast can you get to Whitmore?" I asked. "I'm already packing," she said. Raymond didn't waste time. Within 3 weeks of Emmett's commitment, he obtained emergency authority over the property. Within 5 weeks, he had a buyer, Whitmore Development Partners, a group that wanted to tear down the shop and build a mixed-use retail space. They scheduled demolition for the second Saturday in October. I stood across the street and watched them bring in the equipment: a backhoe, a dumpster, a crew of 6 men who had no idea what they were about to destroy. They started with the window full of clocks that had been there since 1971. Each one handmade, each one a story. They pulled them out and threw them into the dumpster like trash. Glass shattered, brass bent, 50 years of work crumbling in minutes. Then they went inside, the workbenches, the tools, the loops and files and tweezers and jigs, instruments Oscar had brought from Switzerland in 1939, into the dumpster. Then the wall clocks, one by one, smashed, tossed, discarded, each one containing a piece of my grandfather's case. Evidence scattered into rubble, but they couldn't remove the mahogany clock. The foreman tried. 2 men with crowbars tried. They called Raymond. He came and stared at it, red-faced, furious. "Just break it off the wall." They swung a sledgehammer. The bracket held. The wall cracked around it, but the clock held firm. Emmett had bolted it to the foundation, to the bones of the building itself. You'd have to tear down the entire structure to remove it, and even then the clock would be sitting in the rubble, still ticking. Raymond screamed at the foreman. The foreman shrugged. "Sir, that thing is anchored into the slab. I'd need a jackhammer, and even then I might destroy whatever's inside it." Raymond's face went pale. "What do you mean, whatever's inside it?" The foreman pointed at the clock face. "There's something behind the mechanism. I can feel weight distribution. There's a compartment." Raymond tried to pry it open with a screwdriver. Nothing. He tried a drill. The casing was lined with hardened steel. My grandfather, a man they called delusional, had engineered a vault disguised as a clock, anchored to a foundation, protected by a mechanism that only one key in the world could open. The demolition paused. Raymond stood in the gutted shell of his father's shop, surrounded by the wreckage of 200 clocks, staring at the one he couldn't break. He didn't know I was watching from across the street. He didn't know Nina Moretti was filing an emergency injunction at that exact moment. And he didn't know that every clock he destroyed, every single one, had already been cataloged. Because 6 months earlier, I'd visited every client on Emmett's ledger, every home, every office, every church. I'd photographed every clock. I'd extracted every document, every recording, every piece of evidence my grandfather had spent 40 years hiding. The clocks in the shop were decoys. Beautiful, real, functional decoys. But the actual evidence was already in Nina's possession. Organized, cataloged, filed. My grandfather had planned for the demolition. He'd planned for the destruction of his life's work. He knew Raymond would do it, and he'd made sure that destroying the clocks would accomplish nothing except proving Raymond's character in court. The only thing that mattered was the clock on the wall, the one they couldn't break, the one only I could open. The emergency injunction halted the demolition. Nina filed a motion to vacate the commitment order based on a comprehensive evaluation from 3 independent psychiatrists, all of whom concluded that Emmett Brennan was of sound mind. She also filed fraud charges against Dr. Paul Weston, whose medical license, it turned out, had been suspended in 2 other states for providing false evaluations for financial compensation. Raymond had paid him $8,000. Bank records confirmed it. The hearing was on a Monday, Whitmore County Courthouse, the same courthouse whose lobby held a clock Emmett had built in 1984. It was still ticking. The judge could hear it from the bench. Emmett was released from the psychiatric facility that morning. He walked into the courtroom in his work clothes, flannel shirt, leather apron still in his truck. His hands were steady, his eyes were clear. 200 people from Whitmore packed the gallery, clients, neighbors, friends, people whose walls held his clocks, people whose homes kept his time. Nina presented the case, the false evaluation, the financial relationship between Raymond and Dr. Weston, the unauthorized demolition, the destruction of irreplaceable historical artifacts, Raymond and Colleen's documented conversations about selling the property, conversations Emmett had recorded and hidden inside clock number 47 at St. Augustine's 2 years earlier. When the recording played, Raymond's voice saying, "Once we get the old man locked up, the building's ours. Colleen and I already have a buyer. He won't even know what happened." The courtroom went silent. Raymond's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. The commitment order was vacated. Raymond and Colleen were referred to the district attorney for charges including fraud, elder abuse, filing false psychiatric documents, and destruction of protected property. After the ruling, I drove Emmett back to the shop, or what was left of it. The walls were standing, the roof was intact, but inside was gutted. 52 years of work, gone. Emmett walked through the debris slowly. He picked up a bent brass gear from the floor, held it in his palm, looked at it the way you look at a photograph of someone you've lost. Then he walked to the mahogany clock, still on the wall, still ticking, the only survivor. He looked at me. "Do you have the key, little bird?" I pulled it from around my neck, where I'd worn it every day for 2 years. He stepped aside. "This one is yours to open." I inserted the key, turned it left, right, left, left, the sequence he'd taught me when I was 16. The faceplate clicked, swung open on hidden hinges. Inside was a brass compartment, sealed, dry, perfect. I pulled out the contents one by one. The original property deed, signed by Oscar Brennan in 1953. A revised will, leaving everything, the property, the land, the intellectual rights to every clock design, the full Brennan archive, to me. Sadie Brennan, sole heir. A handwritten letter from Emmett. And one final item, a small pocket watch. Rose's wedding watch. The one he'd stopped at 3:42 a.m. He'd placed it inside the clock like a heart inside a chest. I opened the letter. "Sadie, if you're reading this, then the clock worked. And so did you. I built 216 clocks in my life, but only one was meant to outlast me. This one. Because this one holds the only things that matter. The truth, your future, and your grandmother's heartbeat. Win the pocket watch. It still works. Like everything I've ever built. Like you. Grandpa." I wound the watch. It ticked. Emmett put his hand on my shoulder. The clocks on Main Street, the ones still hanging in homes and churches and offices, struck noon. All at once. The whole town ringing with the time a clockmaker had built into its walls. "What are we building today, little bird?" he asked. I looked at the gutted shop, at the debris, at the one clock still standing. "Everything," I said, "from scratch." He smiled. The same smile he'd had my entire life. Steady, patient, built to last. Raymond was convicted of elder abuse and fraud. 18 months. Colleen received probation and a restraining order. Dr. Weston lost his license permanently. The shop is being rebuilt. Brick by brick. I'm doing most of the work myself. Emmett supervises from his bench, the one I pulled from the dumpster and restored with my own hands. We installed the mahogany clock in the new shop first. Before the walls, before the floor. The clock went in first. Because that's what a foundation is, and not concrete and steel. It's the thing you build everything else around. If this story moved you, and if it made you think about someone in your life who builds quietly while the world looks the other way, I need you to subscribe right now. Hit that bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because every week I bring you stories about the people who get underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. And the moment the world finally realizes what it almost lost, drop a comment. Tell me, what would you have done if you watched them demolish that shop? And what do you think was the most brilliant part of Emmett's plan? My grandfather didn't need revenge. He needed time. And time was the one thing he'd spent his whole life mastering. I'll see you next time.